Hello, and welcome to another video. In this video, we're going to be talking about part 3 in the series about the Ruzovian Empire. Before then, we talked about how it began and how it survived after being divided into four different states. Now we're going to be talking about how the Ruzovian Empire became known as the Conqueror of Continents. So let's not waste any time, and let's begin. In the beginning of the Fourth Era, the Ruzovian Empire landed settlers and soldiers under Ari, after a duke agreed to be the Ruzovian vassal. The duke, Amirius, then began to expand his duchy. By 31 of the Fourth Era, he had expanded it to incorporate much of his surrounding regions. In 31, Amirius died without an heir, and thus the duchy was taken over by someone named Vecnavar, who wanted to separate himself from the Ruzovian Empire. However, the new Ruzovian Emperor Remulus I had a message from a Shavir, in which the Shavir told him that the god of the land and the soil had destined Remulus to be a conqueror of continents. Thus, he sent an army of 30,000 soldiers to depose Vecnavar and secure his rule. After securing his hold onto Ari, Remulus then organized an army of 100,000 soldiers using mostly local recruits. In return, he allowed for them to rule the areas that they were at, and allow for them to rule mostly independently, only in return for taxes and soldiers. In 35 of the Fourth Era, Remulus went to war against the many different duchies in the area, as the region was split in this time period. However, he had faced his first challenge when the kingdom of Nixerv was located. Initially, the Ruzovians were defeated in battle of Shavok in 40, but the Ruzovians then avenged this battle by defeating the Nexervians in the Battle of Plastiv. Remulus wanted to conquer further into Ari. However, at home, people had believed Remulus was dead, so a usurper named Avirian marched an army into Roruz, forcing Remulus to return home. After he returned home, Remulus was struck by an arrow in battle and killed. Avirian had a fight against Remulus' son, Remul IV, who defeated him in battle in 49. During this time, Remul had a bastard son, Marion, who would be sent to Ari at childbirth. Remul eventually managed to secure his rule by 52. In 56 of the Fourth Era, Remul married his daughter to the son of the Ruthenian Emperor. In return, the Ruthians gave Remul a port in Selistas and its neighboring land. This was the first out of many royal marriages that the Ruzovian and Ruthenian emperors would engage with one another in order to intermarry and strengthen their relationship. Back on Vanza, many of the elite did not support the marriage. Thus, in 61 of the Fourth Era, they attempted to do a coup, with the head of the Rumela family, Gavarian, being chosen to replace Remul. The coup failed, causing Gavarian to retreat to the north where yet another civil war happened. Gavarian managed to defeat Remul in battle, but agreed to make peace as he was running low on money. The Ruzovian political system was becoming destabilized as nobles began to feud more frequently with one another. Thus, in 69 of the Fourth Era, Remul and some powerful nobility met in the consulate of Rava, in which Remul would eventually convince the nobles to compromise, thus preventing fighting. However, this would actually do nothing to stop the political issues, but only delay the issue. At the time, in Ari, the Desert Empire was an empire located over much in the Center Desert regions, and it ruled over much of it. They had recently went to war with the Ruzovians in 79 of the Fourth Era, leading Marion to lead an army of 600,000 soldiers and move them against the Desert Empire, who had over 900,000 soldiers. In the Battle of Tinukdara, Marion managed to perform a flanking maneuver which allowed for him to rout and destroy the Desra army. Afterwards, he went on to occupy the capital, Arva del Desra, and soon conquered the entire Desra Empire by 80. After the final conquest of the Desra Empire, the Ruzovians were starting to become a threat to the continent. Thus, two prominent states, the Maxyrian Empire and the Archduchy of Goldland, allied with each other in order to defeat the Ruzovian Empire. Marion decided to launch a preemptive strike against the Maxyrian Empire, causing a war. Marion won every battle, including the Battle of Yargad, which was one of the largest battles in Ruzovian history, with over 1.3 million Ruzovian soldiers facing off against 1.5 million Goldland Maxyrian soldiers. So you can see on this map that the Maxyrian Empire was actually quite a huge empire, though it did not have a lot of control, and much of its population was rebellious. Afterwards, Marion would go on to lead numerous conquests in all directions. He conquered Marcia in 90, Goldland in 96, and most of Ari by 120. However, at this point, he was getting old, and his conquest stopped. However, he decided to do one more thing. He sent an offer to the Ruzovian Emperor Adriscol, and managed to become the King of Kings of Garvia. Garvia was the name of Ari that the Ruzovians gave it, as it was the name of a mythical land that was said to have all geographies at once within it. Thus, this began the first Garvian period of Ari. Starting in 52 of the Fourth Era, the Ruzovians launched a conquest on the tip of Maldor to the north. Initially, it was only some Ruzovian soldiers, but over time, the Ruzovians would lead more and more conquests into the north. Eventually, in 67, the Ruzovians appointed a man named Vermakis to become the king of Maldor. He and his successors would lead many conquests, eventually controlling a large part of the continent by 100 of the Fourth Era. Now, even though Maldor was easily conquered, it was very difficult to actually rule over a lot of this land. And so even though, on a map, it looked like they had conquered a lot of it, they only ruled a certain proportion of it, leaving the rest to pretty much total independence. In 103 of the Fourth Era, the Emperor, Rommel V, died without an heir. Thus, the throne went to his brother, but he died as well. Rommel didn't have any brothers, so the Ruzovians held a vote. However, the nobles couldn't agree on any candidate, and two emerged. Then, a civil war began, where Adriscol would win in 107. He would live until 126, when he suddenly died. Another civil war would occur between a man named Rommel and Adriscol II. Adriscol, who claimed to be the son of Adriscol I, won the civil war by 130. However, he was soon assassinated, and his place, Macarinius III, would take the throne. Macarinius had an infamous dislike of the nobility around him. Thus, he was always looking for ways to limit their power in every way he could. He was more relatable to the peasantry than the nobility, and this caused revolts that wanted to depose him. In fact, the nobility felt he was so like a peasant that they called him things like the People's Emperor, the Peasant's Emperor, and some of them would even go as far as to call him the Dirty Emperor. However, they were unable to revolt, and with each revolt, Macarinius would further strip the power of the nobility, which would make him look like a tyrant in the eyes of the nobility. He believed in a meritocratic government, and thus he appointed people to positions based on how skilled they were, rather than their money or family. This caused discontent with the nobility, but Macarinius was very powerful in much of his rule. Thus, after 142, they really couldn't do much for a while. In 146, the Ruthenian emperor died without an heir. Since Macarinius' mother was a princess of the Ruthenian Empire, he decided to take the throne. Thus he marched an army of over 200,000 men into Armor and had the nobles proclaim him Emperor of the Ruthenian Empire. This was quite hard to do, and it nearly led to a war, but the nobles felt like this war would be a defeat, and they did not want to have to deal with having to find another emperor. Instead, they decided to rule themselves right after he left, which is what exactly happened. So when he left, much of his authority was diminished, and he ruled as emperor for only a couple years. This is the period of time in which the Ruzovian Empire was at the height of its power. It ruled over all 4 continents, ruling large stretches of land. However, he soon gave up much of his land on the continent of Dunaland, giving the title of Ruthian Emperor to his cousin, Remel I of the Ruthian Empire. The Octavide dynasty in the Ruthian Empire would change its name and become much more tied to the land of which it ruled. And so you'll see that this will actually develop into a rivalry in the future. Macarinus III's reign also saw the greatest extent of Ruzovian power. However, by the 160s and 170s, things began to change. For one, on Ari, the power of the Ruzovian Empire was quickly decaying as it increased autonomy of places like Marcia, Goldland, and Hilland. These places would also drift away over time. But because of issues at home, Macarinus didn't have the resources and the time to deal with these issues, and neither did the kings of Garvia. The Rumelovs were a dynasty that began to gain infamy in the 50s. They were known for their unique and radical pyramid structure. This pyramid structure held races to a class-like system, where certain races could describe someone's role in society. It also so think of it like this. Some races would be at the top and would generally be seen to be... Why does this happen? That's weird. Anyway, so at the top, you've got certain races that are seen as noble or that go to higher places. Now, there are also other races that are more lower in the pyramid, and these races are the ones that might, become the workers. Now, the worst of the worst are seen as, let's say, vermin or slaves. Now, so the head of the family, Rascalius, made a compromise to the nobility. In return for granting them many of their powers back, the nobles would support Rascalius. Thus, in 176 of the Fourth Era, he launched a coup. The coup failed, so Rascalius fled to the countryside. However, in 191, when things were getting tense, Rascalius launched a second coup. This failed again, but this time he was able to launch an uprising over much of the north. Eventually, in 194, he managed to land an army onto Roruz and a battle ensued. Macarinus was killed in the process, and his close relatives were soon captured and executed, or fled to the Ruthenian Empire. By 200 of the Fourth Era, the Rumelovs had complete control over Vanza, and this would change the history of the Ruzovian Empire, and quite frankly, the world, for the rest of history. Thank you all for watching. This was a bit of a quicker video, I have to admit, but nonetheless, I still appreciate you for watching. I really have nothing much to say. I hope each and every one of you has a good day or night, and I'll see you all another time.